How is everybody doing? And welcome back for another Strength Chat episode. Today, I have got a very special guest for you. I last spoke to this guy way back in episode 135. I think there was some unfinished business there. There was plenty more that we could have spoken about. Today, I am joined by the creator of the strength system, the one and only, the Australian strength coach, Sebastian Oreb. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me. I don't know what 135th episode, I don't know the exact date of that, but you might have to refresh my memory. But I know time has gone, it's been a little bit skewed since COVID. I don't know, was it a year ago? How long ago was that?
Probably just over a year ago. It was probably just at the start of COVID, and yeah, we spoke about competitions and strongman competitions and powerlifting competitions, and then the world decided to change a little bit. How have you been over the what's been happening in your world with everything? I know obviously it's been spoken about a lot, but I always like to ask that question because everything kind of stopped for a long period of time. There was no strongman competitions, powerlifting competitions got put on hold. What's been happening since we last spoke in your world?
It's interesting because there's a lot of facets to my life. I'm a business owner, I'm a husband and a father, and I'm an athlete. So all three of those facets have really flipped over on their head actually since last time I saw you. I've got a newborn baby, which is probably the biggest change in my life. She's amazing. She's 8 months old. And so I didn't have that. I think my wife would have been pregnant last time I spoke to you. Yeah. It's kind of one of those things. What do you do when you're in lockdown? That was one of them. We had a baby. From a business standpoint, it's been up and down, but overall it's been great because it's from day one I just thought this has to be an opportunity for me to think about doing something different, and it definitely was. So we spent a lot more time creating online education and spending more time on my online coaching as well. So we got a lot more systems in place with using internet and not having to be face to face with people, which sounds antisocial, but it's the climate that we've all been in, and we had to deal with what we were given, and we had no choice. From an athlete standpoint, of course, I'm a powerlifter, and there was a number of competitions that the government has teased us with opening and shutting and opening and shutting with the quarantines and lockdowns. And the most recent competition that I was training for, it just got postponed again. So I had 3 major competitions that I was working towards. And, it's interesting. As a powerlifter, a lot of people think, oh, that's not that much. But for me, I don't want to throw the age card at it, but I don't like to compete more than once per year, to be honest with you, because it's pretty hard on my body it's not just not hard on my body. Of course it is hard on my body, but also I'm quite selfish when it's that time of the year. And I believe a lot of my high level athletes are. It's kind of something that I recommend when people, they're after great things. They need to make sacrifices with work and with family. And I'm lucky enough that I've got a great support system around me. So every time I prepared myself for a competition, I had, my whole family on board, my business going on hold and doing all of those things just so they could be called off. So the last competition was meant to be when was it? A week after my birthday. It was meant to be this weekend. Right. And then they postponed it to the end of December. And it's like, okay, that's an extra 10 weeks. So that means my prep is usually about 16 weeks. So this made it 26 weeks. And then they just changed it again. So it's going to be in April. So it's like, I don't want to spend my entire year just, in preparation for competition. So I don't even know. So I'm not sure if you're following my social media or if anyone out there is following, but I've lost a whole bunch of weight just in anticipation of this. It's too much for me to bear a heavy body weight. I love being strong. But to be honest with you, when I'm that strong and that heavy, that's all I'm good for, is standing on the spot and lifting a heavy weight. But everything else in life is pretty hard. Like walking down the street is hard. I get a back pump. I get uncomfortable. Lots of little things. I make some jokes on my social media. Not being able to see my penis. That's a little bit of a joke, but maybe a little bit of truth behind that as well. So now that's it. So we've just opened up. Sydney has just opened up. They called it, what do they call it? Freedom Day. That was on Monday. Today's Wednesday. They called it Freedom Day, which is where life kind of goes back to normal only if you've been double vaxxed.
Right.
So which has caused another argument within itself. The argument is that it's discriminating people that aren't vaccinated by choice or, not by choice. Anyway, that's where we're at right now, but I've got no competitions ahead of me. Now we're able to start seeing people face to face, and who knows what life's going to bring over the next year. Maybe we'll go back in lockdown again. Who knows?
Yeah, it's one of those things where you just think, at the minute, everything is getting relatively back to normal. I did see that Australia had opened up a little bit, but especially touching on the competitions, especially because you've been in lockdown for quite a while as well. And in terms of the training side of things, like what you're saying about always being in a competition phase, that can be quite hard going all the time. One thing that I do want you to touch on there, because one of the coaches that I work with has just recently had a baby girl as well, and his training routine has changed a little bit. We've because obviously his circumstances have changed in sleep. How did tying that into the fact that you've had lockdown preparing for a competition? Did anything change? Did you have to change your routine a little bit? I know it's a little bit of a tangent, but it's one of those things where you just think, oh yeah, how does Sebastian train? I bet he's got this sorted and this sorted, but throwing in a newborn baby, can change your routine a little bit.
It absolutely does. And whenever I see people, competitive athletes that I follow or they're competing against us, and whenever I see they're having a child, I always kind of think, I absolutely know that's going to have some kind of weight against the way they prepare themselves for competition, because there is unless they move out of their home and they don't support their family, which I don't know too many people that do that, but it is possible, and that's, I guess, the only solution to not having a newborn baby interfere with your recovery and your sleep that's needed. And even it can't just be up to the wife or the mother of the child to do everything. I'm very lucky that my wife, the mother of my children, she's amazing and she does so much. So like I said, I've got a lot of things in place that I've been able to make sacrifices, and my family were making sacrifices as well. And I'll be honest with you, I'm sure she was sick and tired of it now. And she's probably happy to hear that the competition's not on till next year. Whether I do that or not in April, who knows where we're going to be at in what is that, 5 months from now? I don't know where I'm going to be. So yeah, I'll tell you right now, for myself, I'm lucky that my business doesn't need for me to be at any specific time, at any specific place. Social media and internet allows me to do work from anywhere. But I do know that not everyone has that luxury. This has taken me 20 years of being in the industry and setting myself up so that I own my own gym and I can do things like this at my leisure. I don't want to act like I'm bragging about it, because I've had to work my butt off, and I still do work my butt off so that I can have those, so that I can prioritize my training so that I can compete. But I absolutely know, and I've got some of my athletes that I'm great friends with that are some of the strongest athletes in the world. The first person that comes to my mind is Graham Hicks. I'm sure you know him. He's former UK's strongest man, Britain's strongest man, and he's got newborn kids. I think he's got 3 kids. He's got a full-time job. And whenever I speak to that guy about his training, he's always got something on with work, or he's got the kids, and and it adds up. And you've got people like that have a lot of injuries, and those injuries come from wanting to say, what, I'm not going to let anything get in my way. It doesn't matter how hard I have to work. I'm going to come back after work and I'm going to train just as hard. Something's got to give. You know what I mean? It's like you got 1 cup and you can fill it all with training, but you can't fill it with anything more than that. So this is the analogy. This is full of training. You can't fill another one of those with work and with family and training. I don't know which 3 I use, but it's like, something's got to give. You've got to prioritize something, and if you try and prioritize everything, things fall apart. So for me, yes, it was hard to juggle it, but I was able to manage it because I've been doing it for so many years as well. But I do know whenever I see athletes with newborn children, 10 times out of 10, it will impact the way they train and prepare themselves for competition. And in most cases, it'll make them perform a lot less than what they would have had they not had a child. Not saying that having a child is a bad thing. It's an amazing thing. But we just got to get our priorities right.
Yeah, absolutely. And why I touch on that, it seems to be, you touched on it there, what was there to do in lockdown? And it seems as though, a lot of coaches that I work with and clients as well. And exactly like what you mentioned there, I like the analogy of filling up that glass. Had a guy sent over, an online client send over training footage the week before. He'd had really bad sleep. His son started teething, so obviously his sleep's affected. And then the week before, and then last week, he just had a better night's sleep, and his training session was just completely different. And it's one of those things of, I know, you need to, because he usually trains before work. I know you need to get in and stuff like that, but sometimes it is that thing of you need to put your energy into looking after yourself, and that'll have a knock-on effect into training, rather than I need to get to the gym, I need to do this. Sometimes the other things are going to be beneficial. The other thing that I wanted to touch on as well, having completed your level 1 and level 2 certificates that you put out there, is the plan to do more in-person seminars, or are you wanting to put more courses on there? Because I know I've not got around to doing level 3, but I've seen that advertised. Was that something that you had planned all the time, or are you enjoying doing more courses? What's the plan with that?
Yeah, so online education allows me to, see the world during a time like COVID. So it's been a great thing for business, but also it's a great thing for me to keep in touch with people all around the world. But I love seeing people face to face as well. And as soon as international travel opens up, I will be on the first flight out there, definitely over to Europe, UK. I love it over there as well. And I love educating face to face and holding my seminars. And every year I study more, I learn more, I coach more, I train more, I compete more. And I have new content every time I come to see my students. So yeah, I've got level 3 is almost here. That's my online education. That's almost here. It's been a little bit delayed because as we were in lockdown, we weren't actually able to have access to our facilities with our staff. Right. And so they were all locked down. And to be honest with you, for me, the show must go on. I'm a worker and I don't stop, and I never did stop, but I can't expect for my staff to have the same thought process as me. A lot of people are actually scared of getting COVID. And legally, if I tell people, stiff shit, you guys have to come to work, and if something bad happens, they're entitled to sue me. So I had to show my duty of care and give them the option of working from home when it was needed. And that slowed down the entire procedure of creating the online education. So it was meant to be due by around now, by mid-October, but it slowed down. Like we had things like body painting, where they painted on the muscle groups for our athletes. And that takes a hell of a lot of time and a hell of a lot of people. So we've got our athletes and the artists, and I've got another anatomist that I work with as well to make sure that we're painting all of the muscles on anatomically correct. So it's a lot of manpower behind these courses. And anyhow, so it just slowed down, but it's going to be released now, especially now everything's up and running again. It's full steam ahead. It should be released within the next month. And that's a very exciting course. I've enjoyed, I'll be honest with you, for those of you who have done level 1 and 2, level 2, the anatomy component was quite complex, talking about things that, the attachment points, the bony landmarks that the muscles attached to, which isn't really the language that we use when we're coaching athletes or clients. So now what we've used is the knowledge that we've learned from level 2. Now we're going to be talking the language and showing exactly how useful it is when we're choosing exercises for our clients or our athletes, choosing exercises, the movement patterns, the muscle groups, and structuring our program in a way. You probably know I talk a lot about achieving structural balance. Yeah. And that's something that I've used with all of my athletes, whether it's a powerlifter, a strongman, or a team sport athlete, or a martial artist. I don't know martial arts. I don't know how to play football or any of the, basketball. And I don't need to know, because they've got a lot of these high level athletes, they have a skills coach. And the role of a strength coach is to strengthen the athlete, make them move well, and make them free from injury. And the way that I do that is by following the rules of applying a structurally balanced approach. So I've gone a lot into that in my level 3. And, yeah, we basically, like, it's what I say with Hafthor Bjornsson. He's obviously my number one, my most successful client that I've ever worked with. It's hard to beat number one. So strongest athlete, strongest strongman in the world, 2018. He was unstoppable. So I don't think I'll ever beat that, to be honest with you. I don't think you can from my line of work. You know, I never competed in strongman. I never picked up an Atlas stone in my life or carried a yoke or a frame or any of those things. But just as well, he was excellent at doing those events, and I was able to teach him basic technique with the barbell movements and structure his program in a way to allow him to perform his sport without any injuries, and at understanding recovery, fatigue management is a huge part of programming as well, and that's the stuff that I like to teach. It's kind of I don't want to keep on saying making it simple for people, because there is a way of simplifying strength training and performing strength movements. There is definitely a way of making it simple, but you definitely do have to put in the hours so that it can be simple. So anyway, online education is great, but then when I see people face to face, they've applied all the knowledge that I've read about or learnt about online or from a book. But you need that face-to-face touch. It makes a huge difference. And I know that. And I'm a hands-on kind of guy. So like I said, I won't stop doing my face-to-face education. We've still been doing some of those in Australia because, domestic travel was allowed. It hasn't been for a while, but it was allowed at some time during this COVID period. So we were doing seminars. I'll definitely be doing those as soon as international travels. I'll be straight over to Europe.
Oh, cool. I know with when you mentioned about the anatomy on level 2, I remember I did I lived in Melbourne for a little bit, and I did an exchange program with the University of Melbourne, or Victoria University, sorry. And one of the subjects that I did was kinesiology, and one of the tests was insertion points and bony landmarks. And I must admit, because it's been a while since I've done that, it did put my did put me to the test a little bit there, thinking about right, so it's been a while since I've learned that a little bit. But I think it's important once you've got that foundation knowledge, because I think sometimes you can learn it, but then forget about it and never think about, all right, how does this apply to coaching or getting people stronger? But it does, because then you have an understanding of how the body works. That moves quite nicely into the topics that I had in mind to chat with you about. And I know before we spoke about everything strength training. This time, I kind of wanted to dive in a little bit more in terms of the programming and the coaching side of things. We spoke about the principles of getting stronger, and you've mentioned there about the structural balance. But I kind of wanted to talk about programming and coaching. And there's clients, especially people getting involved in strength training or working with a coach, and they're just focused about the program. It's just right, what reps and sets and how many times a week do I need to train? How much stronger can somebody get by just following a program? Because everyone's done it, Googled a program or asked a coach and just being like, I just want a program. How much stronger can somebody get by just focusing on that program and reps and sets and just putting the work in?
So the first answer is, how long is a piece of string? So it depends on their interpretation skills. I've written an entire article series on my website for those of you who want to do some extra reading. It's strengthsystem.com, www.strengthsystem.com. And then you go to the article section, and there's an entire series called Your Program Sucks. And basically it's the reason what initiated, especially the first installment of that article series, was my views on movement and technique. And when I see people following programs, but their technique sucks, and I look at it and I think, it doesn't matter who wrote that program, or if it was the best program in the world or the one that the strongest athlete in the world used, the way that you're performing it, you're not going to get the result. That program sucks no matter which program it is. Even if I wrote it, if you're not executing the movements correctly, your program sucks. But then I thought there's a lot more to it than just technique. Technique is absolutely at the top of the hierarchy when it comes to your success and your progression in the gym or with following your program, understanding the correct movements. So all of my programs, the start point for any of my programs is learning the fundamentals of how to move. regardless, if you're coming to me and you're saying, I want to be a bodybuilder, and you're an absolute novice, I'm not going to do those bodybuilding movements, those lateral raises or the bicep finishes. I'm going to take you through the main movement patterns and teach you the fundamentals of the squat pattern, the push pattern, the bend pattern, all of the main compound movements that's going to create the best base for you. And then from there, we decide what type of weak points you have. And this is where structural balance comes into play. Regardless, the first part of your success in the gym is movement. So that's what I'll always do, is work on technique. The second part of the article series, but I talk about it a lot because of the way that I prioritize it. Load selection. So, obviously we need to know the loads of what exercise. So people consider exercise selection to be a huge priority, but actually I've got not very much emotional attachment to any of the exercises that I perform in the gym, unless of course those are the exercises that you use to compete with. For example, a power lifter must perform the squat, the bench press, and the deadlift. But if you're not a power lifter, they're just tools. They're excellent tools, and you can utilize those tools. But a squat pattern is what we're looking at. And there's many ways of achieving a squat pattern, whether it's with a machine, whether it's with a free weight, and same with all of the other movements. A bench press with a barbell is important for a power lifter. Is it useful for a bodybuilder? For sure, it can be. But it's not the only tool. There's a lot of other tools as well that you can utilize. So it's understanding these movement patterns. So anyway, I don't have any emotional attachment. So for example, when I put an exercise like a lat pull down with a neutral grip, a pronate, whatever grip, I don't care, or a row, and people say, oh, we don't like that, variation of the lat pull down. Can we change it to this variation? It's like, of course you can. If you understand the joint actions that you're performing at the shoulder joint, the elbow joint, the muscles that we're working on, yes, absolutely, as well as understanding the principles of variation and how to apply all the different exercises at different stages of your programming. I don't actually care about the exercise itself. They're all just tools to help us achieve our goals, whatever our goal is. And if your goal isn't a specific strength sport like powerlifting or strongman or weightlifting, if your goal is team sports, martial arts, you don't need a barbell, you don't need dumbbells. So anyway, so of course, exercise selection is important, but I don't think it's as important as understanding, once we've got the exercise, how heavy should we go? Because this is another place where I see a lot of people failing. For example, I spoke about this on a recent podcast with Clean Health, where people ask, let's use the number, the program 5x5, just as an arbitrary number. Of course, it's not the best program out there. It's not a bad one, but there's so many different programs that we'll use at different phases of our athletic career. But 5x5, just to make it easy, if we were to do, a set of 5x5 squats, a lot of people come into the gym and think, what do I think I can do for 5 sets of 5 reps of a squat? I think I'll be able to do 100 kilograms. I'm saying 100 kilograms as just an arbitrary number, of course. But, everyone's at different strength levels. But let's just use that number, 100 kilograms. The problem with choosing a number that you can already do, or that you can just do, and you've got to work your butt off to be able to do it, is it doesn't really leave you much room to move in the consecutive weeks. For example, if 100 kilos for me was hard and maybe I missed the reps, so I've got 5, 5, 5, 4, 4. Where do I go to next week? It's going to be pretty tough to increase the load or progress in load. What I'd probably lean more towards is doing that same weight, but being able to get 5, 5, 5, 5, 5. Now, once I do that, where am I going to go to the following week? It's going to be really hard. So an approach that I have, and those that have worked with me know that I'm quite conservative with my load selection. So the model that I use is to save whatever you think you can do, save that for week 2. And in week 1, choose a load that's 5% less than that. So for example, I'll do 95 kilograms on the squat. How will I perform that movement? Pretty good, because I'm strong enough to do 100 kilograms. So 95 kilograms should move quite well. And I should be able to, definitely get 5 sets of 5. I won't miss a rep. The technique will be great because it's submaximal. The following week, what do? That's what I call that week 2 is achieve week. So week 1, we underachieved. Week 2, we achieved what we thought we could have done on week 1. So what's the likelihood of achieving 5 sets of 5 of 100 kilograms on week 2? It's quite good because we've already had a week of practice at a lighter load and we've developed some of those energy systems that we needed for that exact rep set scheme. And the likelihood of getting 95 kilos on week 1 for 5x5, pretty good. 100 kilos for 5x5 on week 2, also quite good. Where do we go on week 3? I think it's a logical thing to go another 5%, and the likelihood of being able to achieve that is quite high. So it's a much more successful approach where we've actually gone conservative in the beginning of the program, just so that we can really kick ass at the end of the program, or kick butt. I don't know how you guys say it over in UK. Maybe you know what I'm talking about. But load selection is a really important part of your progression in the gym. Anyway, there's so many different facets. What we discussed before, external stresses. So you had a new child, COVID lockdowns. We don't have access to a gym facility. Maybe we have a home facility. I don't know. Maybe there's so many different, your boyfriend or your girlfriend broke up with you, or you've been kicked out of home, or you lost your job, or you've lost your income somehow. These are external stresses that absolutely interfere with our success in the gym. And if you don't take that into consideration and you just stick to the program, something's going to go terribly wrong. So yeah, I'm not sure exactly what the question was, like how successful is the program, or how much can you improve with just a program?
Yeah,
it depends.
I think what you're touching on there, you touched on quite a couple of things that I kind of was expecting you to touch on, and I'm quite glad that some of the things that you mentioned there. I know I've said to clients, so I can't be going too far wrong. I think two things that I picked up from there, which is I find really interesting in terms of exercise selection, is kind of secondary. Not really precious about exercises, where it is load selection. Do you think sometimes, especially when, especially with the athletes that you worked with, and they see them doing these exercises like the lat pull down that you've mentioned, people see these programs and think, I need to be doing that exercise, that exercise variation, because these elite level athletes, Theo Bjornsson, one of the strongest men in the world, they're doing that exercise. Right, so I need to be doing that, rather than thinking, actually, I need to be able to perform this exercise with the right amount of weight, because I know I've seen people in the gym thinking, right, how many sets do I need to do? Right, 5x5. And then by the end of it, they're absolutely grinding out reps. But, if you start at maximum, there's no progression from there. Do you think that's where clients, but also maybe coaches, get it a little bit back to front, if you like?
Absolutely. I mean, the reason why I went into great depth with this load selection topic, and I discussed it also last week on another podcast, is because I had a very advanced coach who came to me and asked me that very question a couple of weeks ago on one of the other programs. What's the weight that I should be doing? Actually, it was regarding a wave loading stimulus. It's called the 1-6 method. You may have heard of it. I learned it. I didn't invent it, of course. I learned it from Charles Poliquin. Basically, what you do is you do a heavy single, and then you strip a bit of weight and you do a set of 6, and then you go back to another heavy single, and then another set of 6 again. But so the first 1-6 is a little bit lighter than the next 1-6, and then you go heavier again. So you essentially it's like a wave loading stimulus. And he was a very successful coach. He's a great coach and a great friend of mine. But he was quite confused with load selections, with something seemingly simple. It's like, go hard or go home. You've got to work hard if you want to achieve a great result. It's like, yeah, you do at some stage in your training. But if you beat yourself up every single week, it comes at a cost. And this is where it's an age-old debate. We've got a lot of the hardcore coaches out there saying, the best way to get the results is to put the work in and beat yourself up and work as hard as you can, essentially. And there's so much merit to that. There absolutely is. I'll make sure that my athletes are working hard at certain stages of their preparation, sometimes just to achieve the goal of improving their mental toughness, because this is absolutely crucial in the longevity of your training as well and your success in any sport. You have to have, I don't want to say the balls, but I don't know a better word. You got to have the nuts to be able to push yourself and go above and beyond. And when I say nuts, I'm not talking gender specific here. Girls too. You got to have the nuts to keep on going at some point in your training. But at the same time, no one ever got good after a 12-week program. And this is the unfortunate part. A lot of the studies, a lot of the science that people come to, whenever they're referring back to evidence-based style of whatever it is, all of these research articles, when it comes to the best ways to get stronger, the best ways to build muscle, they're generally 8 to 12-week studies. And they are very limited with resources, and they are absolutely limited with the style of athletes that they perform these studies on. I'm not saying that science is bad. Science helps me with so much, and it gives me so many great ideas. But absolutely, we're in it for the long game, and there's no study that's been performed on a 10-year program. That does not exist. I'm quite sure it doesn't even exist on a 6-month program for any strength athlete. I'm a very lucky person that I've had access to some of the strongest athletes in the world. I have to give a special shout out to Ernie Lillibridge Sr. He was one of my mentors. I met him in 2014, and he taught me he opened my mind up to the heavyweight division of the strength world. So Eric Lillibridge, his son, is still the world record holder in the 140 kilograms powerlifting division. The man can squat 480 kilograms. I don't know what his total was. I think it was 1,115 kilograms, which I believe is still the world record today. And that was set many, many years ago. And something that was unique about his approach was they squatted and deadlifted on the same day, once per week only, and nothing else. And I was brought up on the belief, if we want to get a good squat, or if we want to build quadriceps, we've got to increase the frequency, do it more times. That's how we're going to get better. And, forever we hear this whole thing about Dr. Mike Israetel, a highly intelligent guy. He's done so much for the community. He's developed a thing called MRVs and MEVs, so maximum recoverable volume and minimum effective volume. So there's an amount of volume that you need to do as a minimum before you actually start responding. And if you do less than that, you're probably not going to get a great result. But there's a point where there's a maximum amount of volume that you can perform, that you can recover from. If you do more than that, you're pushing yourself over the edge. Now, there's so much merit to this. And a lot of high-level coaches and athletes, they take this and they say, great, we need to perform X amount of volume because, 10 sets on a certain muscle group is better than 5 sets because there's so many studies that show us that. And what's even better than 10 sets is 15 sets and so on and so on. The Lillibridges, they do 1 top set of their heavy weight, and that's it for the day. And then they do the rest of the session. So if it's squats on week 1, they work up to 1 heavy weight, whether it's a single, a double, a triple, or whatever it is. It's 1 top set, and they're done. After that, they perform a whole bunch of lighter volume accessory work for their deadlifts. The week late, they don't do any squats or deadlifts at all that week after that day. The week later, they flip that. So they go really, really heavy deadlift, 1 top set. And then they do a whole bunch of back down work on squats. It's accessory work. It's really light. So where's the volume in that? There's so much less volume than what these guys are considering to be the minimum effective volume. But how is it working for these guys? I'll tell you how it's working. He can squat 480 kilograms. How long does that take you to recover from? Well, I don't know the answer because I can't lift that much weight either. But a lot of the times, like I said, we do take the science and we do take these scientists' approaches and we utilize them absolutely. But when it comes to the highest level in the world, Eric Lillibridge hasn't had a study performed on him. Thor Bjornsson hasn't had a study performed on him. These guys at the highest level are super heavyweights. So, the exercise that you said, which just quietly in my head, I laughed at when you said Thor Bjornsson doing lat pull downs so other people do lat pull downs. Well, that's because he can't do pull-ups with 200 kilograms. Please forgive him. Yeah, he's strong, but it just doesn't work. The amount of volume that we need from that type of movement pattern, chin-ups is just not a viable movement pattern or an exercise selection for Hafthor Bjornsson. But you get someone that's, under 100 kilograms that can perform them quite well. It's an excellent exercise. But those are the considerations that we make. It's not because a lat pull down is better than a pull-up. But for Hafthor, at that time in his preparation, it absolutely was. So individual differences are a thing. And like I said, the science that exists is absolutely helpful. And I'm not discrediting any of these scientists who have performed these studies. But at the end of the day, no one got good after a 12-week program. Unless, of course, there was a 12-week program after that, and then another 12 weeks, and then another 12 weeks, and so on and so forth. That's the only 12-week program that works, the one that lasts for 10 years.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that was a good way to round that bit up a little bit, because I know sometimes, especially with a lot of powerlifters that I work with are sort of beginners to intermediates. A lot of the intermediates are, getting a few more competitions underneath the belt, but it's predominantly beginners, working their way through. And it's always that thing of, right, this is the first program that we're going to do. But I didn't just do a 12-week program and then that's it. It's kind of that thing of consistently progressing, and one of the phrases that you use always, earning the right to add weight to the bar, rather than just thinking, right, because if everyone could get as strong as they needed to do in 12-week programs, that would be it. You'd only ever do a 12-week program, then do something else. One thing just from what you were mentioning there, especially with the science and the, talking about the Lily Bridges and Thor Bjornsson, they haven't had studies, conducted on them, but what they do obviously works. And I think there's sometimes been a train of thought of you're either science-based and, that's what you're going to focus on, or I don't want to say bro science, but, sort of in the trenches, if you like, and, they know what's worked. It's not in a journal or anything, but they've had success from that. Do you think those two worlds are kind of blending together rather than having these two opposite camps, if you like, when it comes to strength training?
With me, it absolutely does. I need both. I need anecdote and I need science. I need big, strong guys that look like you could break a barbell over their head. The amount I learned from these people. One of the best coaches in the world is Ed Cohen. And this came as a surprise to me. For those who don't know him, he's known as the greatest powerlifter of all time. Whenever I think of whoever the best athlete in the world is, I think that person was born to be that way. I don't think that they're gifted with intelligence necessarily, and I don't think it matters how they did anything. They've just been gifted with levers and just phenomenal strength. And the reason why they're like that isn't because they know how to be great coaches, which was a great surprise to me when I first met Ed Cohen. And the way that I met him was at a powerlifting competition. It was in Sydney. It was a huge competition, and he was walking around helping all of the lifters. There was a guy named Odell Manuel. He opened his first squat on 380 kilograms. He failed it. His second attempt, he tried 390 kilograms. He failed it. So he was going to bomb. So Odell Manuel, I don't know, he had set in his mind 400 kilograms for the squat. For some people, they'd rather bomb than not get a certain number because they need that number to hit the total that they want. So he just put 400 kilograms and thought he'd put up a prayer. Ed Cohen came in, told him, the bar placement is wrong. You need to lower the bar very slightly. We need to change that rack height. This is changing your position in this way. And third attempt, Odell Manuel, he got the 400 kilograms. It's like, how did that work? Well, the small touches that come from decades of experience at the highest level, it showed me something about Ed Cohen that I never would have guessed. I never would have thought he had that type of intelligence when it came to coaching. Now I've worked with him. I know him for many, many years. I don't want to say I know him hugely well because he lives in a different country, and we do speak frequently, and I've stood up on a stage and presented education with that man before. Great privilege. That guy is one of the best coaches. I'd rather have him as a coach than any scientist or academic any day of the week. And yeah, it's like I said, it's like saying Michael Jordan is going to be the best coach. I doubt it. He's a phenomenal athlete, but I don't think he knows why he's that good. He just is, and he's got great work ethic, and no matter how you coached him, he'd always be the best. Yeah, but Ed Cohen, no, very different. That guy's highly intelligent. He knows exactly how to fix so many different levels. And it's not just like, well, my technique is this, so, and if you did it with my technique, it would be better. He looks at people's levers. He breaks them down in a way that I've never seen anyone do before. And he's able to improve on their movement. Anyway, I'm certain there's not much evidence to support his methods, or there's never been any studies that have stood by Ed Cohen and said, okay, let's work together and let's produce some scientific data. I'm quite sure that's never happened. But yeah, we do have access to, especially myself, I've got access to a lot of academics with PhDs on my team. And I've got access to high-level coaches like Ed Cohen, like Ernie Lillibridge Sr., and Stefan Solvi. I'll give him a big shout out. That's another one of the coaches. He's an ex-strongman in Iceland who helped me greatly with Hafthor Bjornsson. And I've got access to these heavyweight strength athletes. Like, people look at me and they say, 110 kilogram guy, you're pretty big. And I think, don't say that too loud, because I'm the small guy in my team. Like, quite literally, I've got probably about 10 of my athletes that are over 150 kilograms. What's that in pounds? About 320 pounds. That's the average of most of my strength athletes. And Thor's 205 kilograms at his peak. It's like, where's the literature on these guys? The rest periods between their sets after they deadlift or squat 400 kilograms is anywhere between 10 to 15 minutes.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
a lot of people would think about that number and think, the first response is, wouldn't you cool down? And it's like, well, these guys don't. But if you're an absolute beginner, or if you're 50 kilograms body weight and you've never trained before, then yes, absolutely you would. But the rules have changed. And when I read the studies, when people talk about optimal rest periods, and the debate is often, what's better for hypertrophy, long rest periods where there's a full recovery, or short rest periods. And then I look at what they are referring to as a long rest period, and I think it's like between 3 to 4 minutes. And the way that I think of that, most of my programs with strength are usually between 4 to 5 minutes, and that's for my intermediate lifters. 4 to 5 minutes rest between sets for my intermediate lifters. So if a scientist was to look at my methods, they'd say, this guy's wrong with everything that he's doing. It just doesn't make sense. But in my opinion, thank goodness that I've been able to work with these bro scientists, if we'll call them that. I don't mind. I don't take offense if I'm considered a bro scientist as well. But I'm so grateful that I've got a whole bunch of bro scientists that have spent this much time in the trenches that have taught me a lot of valuable information that you just don't get from any of the research.
Yeah, I think as well, when people are looking at the research and thinking about because one of the things that you said there, with athletes at that level, the rules go out the window a little bit. I think with the research, it just gives you those guidelines. And for people who are maybe just getting involved in strength training, it's a really good, you've touched on it a couple of times, especially with the exercises. It's just a tool. So if you're unsure, if you have no idea what your starting point is, you could look at a study and be like, right, this was done for 10 weeks and the rest did 3 to 4 minutes and they did this workload. It'd be a good starting point. You probably would get results from there. But as you get stronger, again, I think that's a good way of looking at it. The rules change a little bit. One of the biggest things when I go to powerlifting competitions, and as I've gone from regional to national championships, you kind of always want to look at the guys who are winning and setting records and look at, right, what they do. And sometimes you think, right, well, I've got all this food. I need to eat all this food, and sometimes they've just got maybe a bag of sweets and an energy drink or something. That's not going to be enough. But you've got to think about, what you touched on it again earlier, of what are the individual differences. And from what we've chatted about there, that kind of goes on, moving on from the programming side of things to the coaching side of things. And when you've spoken about Ed Cohen there, the small little touches. How much of an influence does the coaching side have on it? And you've mentioned there about Gray and Hicks as well, managing a full-time job and kids. What sort of the added touch, if you like, from the coaching side of things, and how much does the coaching cover the programming, but also everything aside from the programming, if that kind of makes sense?
It absolutely makes sense. And I would have to say, I don't want to sound selfish or narcissistic and talk about me, but I guess I'm the one whose experiences we're talking about in the podcast. So I kind of have to. But I think a lot of my success with my coaching came from making such great friends with my athletes as well. So I am friends with all of these guys that you see me coaching. At the highest level, they're sponsored athletes. So that was a big thing with people that level. Like, so Hafthor Bjornsson, how much would I charge him for personal training? It's like, I didn't want to charge him anything. He would do so much when he did do so much more for my career than whatever the hourly rate would have been. And I don't want him to consider me as, okay, well, that's a coach. I'll pay him his rate for, however many months, and then I'll be on. And it's just a business transaction. So I wanted to take that out of it. And this was kind of not the first time that I sponsored an athlete like that, but having that approach and showing that much goodwill to my athlete, that I'm here with you. I'm emotionally invested in your success rather than just being financially invested in your success. It changed the relationship that I had with my athletes immediately. From there, I was able to, get through to my athletes on a more personal level. I know their wives, I know their children. I know we've been for dinners, we've stayed at each other's houses, we've toured together around the world. And sometimes they want to beat me up, and I'm sure they would have loved to have at many, many times. We've had run-ins. I've had plenty of run-ins with a lot of my athletes, and of course, it's just like a friendship. It's a completely different. It's a unique relationship that I have with a lot of my athletes. But that's where I'm very successful. If you're just too robotic and you just go by the plan, we're dealing with people. We're not dealing with robots. And very often when I write a program out, regardless of how good the athlete is, it is there as a guide. And I'd love for them to follow that guide to a T. But majority of the times, not just sometimes, majority of the times, we have to make certain adjustments to that program at some point in the week or in the month to make sure that everything's okay. Because at the highest priority of coaching is to make sure that we cause no harm for our lifter. Because if we cause a muscle to rip off the bone, there goes that competition prep. Something that I speak very highly of was working with Hafthor from 2016, 16, 17, 18, 19. The one and only injury that we had was in the finals of the World's Strongest Man. He came third in that finals on one, I don't want to say on one foot. He tore a plantar fascia in his left foot. And this was after a yoke in the heats. They actually misloaded his yoke. They had, I think it was 560 kilograms or something like that. It was meant to be 100 kilograms less than that. And a few athletes did that. I don't want to use that as an excuse. A few athletes had to do it and they did quite well with it. Nonetheless, Thor tore a plantar fascia doing it. And that's the only injury that we've ever achieved in 4 years of working. And I don't want to just say working, like competing a minimum of 4 competitions per year at the absolute highest level in the world. One injury to speak of. Unfortunately, that came at a really bad time. And I don't want to say it cost him the World's Strongest Man title, because I don't want to take anything away from the person who did win that year, which was Martins Licis. But before that, Thor was absolutely unbeatable. So injury prevention, if you don't factor in, or if you're not flexible with being able to change the program on the fly, take into consideration things like external stresses, nutrition, I haven't spoken about that. Sleep, I haven't spoken about that. The things that I did speak about, their emotional stress with their loved one, with their partner, with their family, financial stresses with their career. If you don't take that into consideration, simply by asking the question, the thing is, if you're not friends, if you're not personable, if you don't have that relationship with your athletes, it's not going to be very easy for them to come and pour out to you and say, yeah, that my partner broke up with me, or I lost my job today, or something personal about them. A lot of the times when I first get to know any of my athletes and I ask them the questions, how are you today? The answer is, I'm good. Let's get to training. Yeah. Well, like none of your fucking business. In other words, you're just my coach. You're here to do your job. And your job is to help me get good. But nonetheless, back to the point, I do believe that was a huge part of my success, was that I was able to be great friends with a lot of my athletes, which I can't teach people how to make friends with people. I don't know. But it's not the science of it. I'm sure there is a science behind, having a better relationship with the people that you're working with. I'm certain there would be. But yeah, that's my best success was actually, skills as a coach, definitely first and foremost, rather than my skills as a program writer.
Yeah, I think it goes back to what we originally started talking about, and you used the phrase there. You're not dealing with robots. We're dealing with people, and even though you'll know how many sets and reps, and how many times we need to train, and all those things. Whereas the biggest thing that we've touched on there is obviously working with the person, thinking about, right, what other things have got going on, because it's going to be a lot easier to get the best out of them, and get athletes stronger, rather than having that sort of standoffish relationship, because you've got to have an understanding of what motivates them, what are they struggling with. One thing there that you mentioned as well, the nutrition side of things, because especially as a strength coach, there can be a lot of crossovers in different areas, and how much sort of emphasis do you put on the nutrition side of things? Because especially from a client's point of view, they might just think, well, you're just there to write a program and look at technique, whereas there's other things there of how we fuel for the workout, how much sort of emphasis and work do you put into the nutrition side of things, or who do you work with alongside the programming for nutrition?
Yeah, so with nutrition, it's like, okay, it's a theory that I have with all of my coaching: get the most out of the least. Okay, so if I have a new client that's going really, really, really well, so that's kind of the luxury that I have. I get a lot of high level athletes. I guess I'll talk about my most recent strong athletes. Nedzmin Askemovic, I think I said his name incorrectly. I'm sure I did. He's Bosnian strongest man. He's my second athlete to deadlift over 1,000 pounds. He just did that recently at the World Deadlift Championship. He came to me with a 440 kilogram deadlift. So he was already strong, and I'm not taking that away from him at all. Working with him, and I said to him when I started working with him, I said, don't post me on your Instagram page saying I'm working with the Australian strength coach and he's done all of these things for me. You can start saying that after I've done something for you. I don't want the cheap shout out or anything like that, because it's me showing my confidence that I know we're going to get a result. I know how to do this. So anyway, working with him, I'm not going to get his program and his nutrition plan and everything that he's doing and give it a complete overhaul. Of course, I will ask what he's eating. And of course, I need to know what his existing program is. And then I make small changes from there. Once they're completely used to my approach, that's when I'll make a few more small changes. So a lot of these super heavyweights, they need a whole bunch of calories to be able to obtain that amount of size. And I'm talking, usually 7,000 calories per day and upwards, up to 10,000 and more if they have the appetite, which is, I'm not sure if you've ever tried to do that, but to do that every day, that's a large part of it. It's arguably the hardest part of strength at that highest level is the nutrition that comes along with it. And someone that I have actually worked with is Stan Efferding, and that's a very successful type of nutrition plan, was the vertical diet. And this is absolutely no plug on the vertical diet. I mean, it is because I believe in it, not because I'm getting any kickbacks from it at all. I haven't spoken to Stan in a very long time, but his nutrition plan isn't about fat loss. So I think a lot of people might look at his nutrition plan. I don't know what it's like for fat loss at all. I know what it's like for high level performance, and to be able to achieve your certain, your calorie quota for the day, or macronutrient quotas for the day, with a high quality of food. Because if you can eat 7,000 calories of pizza, it's probably a lot easier than having 7,000 calories of, high quality proteins and micronutrients as well, getting your vegetables in, understanding the importance of hydration. And the problem is when you get pizza compared to, lean meat with vegetables, the amount of lean protein and vegetables that you need to eat, it's pretty hard to do compared to, just having a pizza and some ice cream and being done with it. Yeah. So the idea behind the vertical diet is the types of foods that that Stan recommends is very easily digestible foods. White rice with minced beef, so it's already chopped up for you, so it's easier to eat, because you're eating and you have no appetite. You're kind of just like trying to get it down. It's a really hard job. So anyway, so that's the type of nutrition plan or a way of eating that I absolutely believe in for my strength athletes, my athletes that need to eat in a calorie surplus. Something that you said before, which is absolutely the reality when you're looking at high-level competitors and what they eat on competition day. They're just eating a few sweets and they're done with it. When I was with Hafthor, this is the strongest man on the planet, especially in 2018. In between any of his events, he had a meal waiting for him, a proper meal with rice and beef and chicken stock and carrot and peppers and his proper, people know it as the monster mash. If anyone follows Stan's vertical diet, he had a proper meal. But before the meal, he had, it was a protein shake, which was half orange juice because it needed to have a certain amount of fructose, a certain amount of glucose with protein powder and sodium as well. So he pours that as soon as he's finished one event, where a lot of the other athletes, I'm watching them, a lot of the athletes at the highest level are eating lollies or sweets or something that's palatable, because when you're in highest level competition, you have no appetite. You do not want to eat. This changed my view. It's like, okay, you don't want to eat. Okay. Or you can try and be the best on the planet. What's that going to take? What kind of discipline is that going to take? So there was no excuses. There was no shortcuts taken. And that taught me a lot. So now for my own competitions, and whenever I'm working with any athlete, Graham Hicks came over for his first powerlifting competition. And the first thing that I did, I had a meal prep sponsorship, and I poured the food down him. When he was finished eating, it was about 1 or 2 hours later, I'd prepare his next meal for him. And he was looking at me thinking, what are you doing? I know what I'm doing and I'm not fucking hungry. And I said, you've got to eat to win, man. I think it was that I was getting to know him and I wasn't great friends with him at that point, that I believed that he kind of felt rude telling me to bugger off. So he just ate the food. And in that time, I believe he gained 5 kilograms of body weight in that week leading up to the powerlifting competition, was called Big Dogs. In addition to that, during his competition, in between the events, I was forcing food down him as well. At the highest level, if you want to get the most out of it, nutrition absolutely counts. Now, I'm not a nutritionist, so I also have a team of nutritionists that I work with that I will send my athletes to if they want any additional nutritional advice, because I hate stepping out of my lane. But I do know that when you're eating for performance, you got to eat a lot, and it's not an easy job. But yeah, nutrition, if you're not factoring in nutrition, you're missing out on a huge part of your performance. In the world of fitness, I'm in a very different world. Most of the athletes or my success stories come from my heavyweight strength athletes. And calorie surplus is what it's all about. So getting in as much food as possible plays a huge role. Whereas in the fitness industry, a lot of people focus a lot on being in a calorie deficit because fat loss is a huge part of our industry. And that's important because, fat loss is important for health as well. But yeah, that's not really the line of work that I do too much of. And whenever I do that, I hand them straight over to a nutritionist because calorie deficit ain't my thing.
Yeah, definitely. I think, and one of the last things that you said there was, staying in your lane and being very specific about, strength training, about strongman, about weightlifting, about powerlifting. It is about performance, and that, I know a lot of people listening, might have heard a lot of things about fat loss, whereas staying in your lane of for performance, the goal is to get stronger. And I think that's important to understand, keep the goal rather than, well, I'm going to get stronger, I'm going to build a little bit of muscle, I'm going to lose a little bit of fat, I'm going to run faster. No, the goal is to get stronger. And one of the things that you mentioned there as well was, because I think it is good to have an understanding of nutrition, and it's good that having a team around you to work with nutrition, but especially with the programming and looking at what other people have done. One of the first things that you said was, change things gradually over time as you get to know them a little bit more, because I don't know if you're the same, but if everything changes all at once, it's kind of like, oh wow, this is new, rather than small changes, because especially with the athletes that you've worked with, they've got to be doing something right to get to the level that they're at. And then it's a case of, right, how do you get from that point to the next point? And that's the same with, you know, the beginners and intermediates, okay, at a different level, but they'll have some understanding of training. They've been doing something, you know, well, and it's like, right, how do we then progress you to the next level? Quite a lot of topics covered there. Again, you know, I could probably speak to you for a lot longer every time that you know, I chat with you. But the last question that I always like to ask: what would be your take-home points or words of wisdom for everything that we've chatted about there, for everyone listening?
I'd have to say longevity. And I'm going to finish off with a quote. It takes 10 years to become an overnight success. It's something that I learned many, many years ago, you know, and it sounds like it has a ring to it. And it's funny because 10 years, obviously, that's an arbitrary number. But Hafthor Bjornsson won the World's Strongest Man on his 10th year of competition. So a little bit of coincidence behind that. Just recently, I was giving that same quote to another a class when I was doing a program design seminar. And I said, you know, it takes 10 years to become an overnight success. And there was a lady in the crowd who was a world record holding powerlifter for the IPF. And I asked her, how long did it take you to achieve your first world record? And she said 10 years. And I said, like, actually 10 years? Exactly. She said, exactly 10 years before I achieved my first world record. So there's something to it. But what there is to it, mainly, it doesn't have to be 10. It could be 9, it could be 8, it could be 11 or 12. It's definitely not 12 weeks. That's for sure. And it's not sexy, unfortunately. And I have a look at a lot of successful Instagram personalities or personal trainers and coaches online with their 8-week transformations or whatever it is. And I don't want to shit on those because I do sell 12-week programs. But like I said, my 12-week program comes with another 12-week program after that. And it's a great way to get someone into a routine or a habit, if you like, to start their journey towards their optimal body or their optimal goals in strength and performance or whatever it is that you want to be training towards. It's going to take you a long time, and it's going to be a hell of a lot longer than 12 weeks. Now, here's a few of my tips. How do you get that way? How do you stay in it for long enough to be good? Everyone that I've worked with at the highest level in strength, and this can also be said in any field, anyone who's successful or at the very top of their field are very passionate about what they do. They absolutely love what they do. And this was what turned me towards strength training. I started off my journey in the gym, with the Arnold Schwarzenegger encyclopedia. I wanted to look good to impress a girl. After a few years, I plateaued. Training got a little bit boring. I got sick of looking in the mirror to see if my abs were looking any better or any of those subjective measurements until I met a strength coach who introduced me to very simple principles. The first one being progressive overload that I'd never really considered in my coaching career. And it was a game changer for me. And it was so amazing that I watched objectively the numbers on the barbells increasing month by month, year after year. It was so enjoyable for me. And that's why I was able to see it through. I've been doing this way more than 10 years. I'm just not a gifted athlete like some of these giants that I've worked with. For me, I've put 20 years for me to become this overnight success. And I'm still not even anywhere close to the best in the world when it comes to powerlifting, which is my chosen sport. But yeah, play the long game. How do you play the long game? Don't get injured. Love what you do. I'd have to say that's going to take you very far. Yeah. And master your techniques. Understand that technique absolutely matters, especially when it comes to performance.
Yeah. One of the things that you said there is, the journey of getting stronger. And it's one of those things, yes, you can do a 12-week program, but you're not going to be the same lifter after the next 12-week program. You're not going to be the same lifter after the next 12-week program. I sometimes look, like Facebook memories and all those sort of things will come up. And yeah, it was coming up. It always comes up around November time, because that was the very first competition that I did. And looking back at the size of me when I did my first competition, I've gone up a few weight classes since then. And the numbers that I'm lifting, it's one of those things of, like what we've touched on before, it doesn't all just happen straight away. You don't lift the maximum amount of weight ever, and that's it. That's as much weight you can lift after 12 weeks. The thing is, and we kind of spoke about it a little bit all the way through, the goal is always to get stronger. You can get strong after a 12-week program, but you always want to get stronger. How much, can you progress a little bit more? Thanks a lot for taking the time to jump on again. Really, really appreciate it. For anyone who hasn't seen any of the content or information that you put out there, where can people find you, the content you put out there, or reach out to you?
The best place is just at Australian Strength Coach. That's my Instagram. That's where I do most of my work. But now I've also got a website where I do give a lot of free information, free articles, and also free video tutorials on the main lifts that we see in powerlifting. You don't have to be a powerlifter to use the squat, bench press, and deadlift, but you don't have to use those movements either. And it's totally up to you. And I'm not jamming anything down your throat. It's totally for free. So that's www.strengthsystem.com, or at Australian Strength Coach. I try and give as much lighthearted education as possible. That's the main places that you can find me.
Awesome. Thanks again, Sebastian, for taking the time to jump on. Thanks a lot to everyone listening, and I will see you all next week.
Thanks so much for having me, Stephen. I really appreciate it. It was great chatting with you. And thank you to everyone who stayed for the entire hour and whatever it was to listen to this to the end. I appreciate you all. Take care. I hope to do it again, Stephen.
Thanks a lot.